Good day, ma'am. Good day, everyone. By the way, I am Mary Grace Gutierrez, and I am one of the members of Group 2, and I will be discussing the last part under the 1987 Philippine Constitution, its historical development prior to the adaptation of the 1987 Constitution. So today we will be discussing the 1943 Constitution. This was during the time of Japanese occupation in the year 1943 to 1945. So the 1943 Constitution, it was drafted under the Japanese-sponsored government led by President Giuseppe Laurel. So it was part of Japan's effort to legitimize its control over the Philippines. So as we all know that during the Japanese occupation, nahitabo sad ang World War II. So this is the time that the Japanese invaded the Philippines after ang mga Americans surrender. So the 1943 Constitution was created during, again, the Japanese occupation sa Pilipinas, and it was designed to win Filipino support, and gusto nila nga mapakita bitaw for show lang, project an image of Filipino autonomy. So although maingon sila that Philippines gained independence during this time, no, kitagaan kagawasan sa mga Japanese to govern our country, but wala gid siya truly na-reflect. Kay although ilan ang istorya, but it was largely a puppet government. No, still the Japanese, they still the ones nga ni supervise, they are the ones who controlled our government sa Pilipinas. So here also, napulihan na, no? Gipulihan na ang pre-existing Commonwealth government which had gone into exile in the United States under the president na si Manuel L. Quezon. So during the drafting of this constitution, so preparatory commission for Philippine independence was formed by Japan to draft the constitution. So it was chaired by Giuseppe Laurel. So again, Giuseppe Laurel was the president during the Japanese occupation, along with the commission na consisted of mga prominent mga Filipino leaders na although many are forced to participate, but they still participate in the creation and drafting of the 1943 Constitution. So the Japanese Republic was established, and ang new constitution was ratified by the Filipino collaborators called Kapisanan ng Paglilingkod sa Bagong Pilipinas, or also known as Kalibapi. Again, Kapisanan ng Paglilingkod sa Bagong Pilipinas, or also known as Kalibapi. So again, the drafting process during this time, no, pag-draft nila sa constitution, it was heavily influenced by Japan's interest, okay, limiting the Commission's autonomy nga mo-draft a constitution that truly reflects kung unsa ang needs sa usa ka country. So aside from that, these are also the key features of the 1943 Constitution. So here, the government structure established a unitary republic with a strong executive, and also uses unicameral National Assembly. So the president here, na sila'y broad kaayo nga powers, but was ultimately accountable to Japanese authorities. So they also uses unicameral National Assembly, wherein muna siya silbi ang legislative body. But naagyapon siya limited gyapon ang real power. So aside from that, one of the features of this constitution is the provisions on independence. So the Japanese declared that the Philippines was already a independent nation during that time. But it was only nominal. So nominal lang siya, as the Japan controlled gihapon mga major decisions nga buhaton sa atoang government sa Pilipinas. So aside from that, they also emphasizes economic policies, emphasizing economic collaboration with Japan. So they wanted to promote sufficiency sa Pilipinas, but ang mga resources gihapon kay na puntara na redirected to support mga Japan's war and efforts. Kay di ba kung asay war, dako sa jud kaayo siya gasto, no, mga 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 weapons, mga pagkaon sa mga sundalo, mga kinahanglan nila nga mga resources. We also have here Bill of Rights, no? Provisions on civil liberties like freedom of speech and religion. So again, they also included mga provisions on civil liberties like freedom of speech and religion. Although they say na we have this um, mga rights, still dili gihapon siya wala gyapon siya na put into practice with kaayo no. Kay though these were kanang naa but it was rarely upheld in practice. So one of the challenges and in 1943 Constitution kay it was recognized as legitimate and binding only in the Japanese-controlled areas of the Philippines and was completely ignored by the U.S. government and the Philippine government in exile. So this constitution also was considered as short-lived version of na constitution. So it was considered as a short-lived constitution because ang mga Americans, they came back and freed us from the Japanese. And they restored also the 1935 Constitution. And after few years, the Americans gave us our independence. So what year gani gitagaan tag independence sa mga Americans? Yes, that's correct. July 4, 1946. So again, the Americans gave us our independence on July 4, 1946. Okay? And after the 1943 Constitution, it followed, sunod dayon ang 1973 Constitution. So, ito na siyang panahon ng post-war republic and Marcos era. The 1946 independence and the 1935 Constitution. The 1935 Constitution was reinstated after liberation from Japan, guided the newly independent Republic of the Philippines. So, after the liberation no, sa Pilipinas sa Japanese occupation in 1945, ang 1935 Constitution nabalik siya. No, nailisdan na sad ubalik ang 1943 Constitution and it was considered as the fundamental law of the land, ang 1935 Constitution. Or in other words, it was considered as the supreme law of the land. So the 1935 Constitution, it provided a presidential form of government with three branches. We have the executive, legislative, and judiciary. So dire, in presidential form of government, each of these branches na sila separate ilahang power. So the legislative also uses the bicameral legislature wherein na ay two chamber. We have the Senate and the House of Representatives. So it helped the new republic also rebuild its institutions, na revive ang economy, and para ma-recover sa nila ang mga destruction caused by the World War II. However, bisan pa sa mga effort nilang gihatag no, nagyapon ang problem like poverty, corruption, and even favoritism in politics also became the major concerns during this time. So, after the Americans gave us our independence on July 4, 1946, daghan ng mga president sa Pilipinas, no, they rule the country using the 1935 Constitution until niabot si Marcos into the picture. No? So during the administration of Marcos, so naa siya plan to make a new constitution. So later, maabot na diha. So the 1973 Constitution, it was drafted under Ferdinand Marcos's regime. It shifted the government from a presidential to a parliamentary system, and Marcos also used martial law from 1972 to 1981 to consolidate power, weakening democratic institution. So, si Marcos, he was first elected in 1965 for president and then re-elected siya in 1969. So, during sa iyahang term, naanay plan to make a new constitution with that And because of that, the Constitutional Convention, they began to meet in 1971. So ang Constitutional Convention, these are mga elected na mga delegates. So the year 1972, so before ma-end iyahang second term, Marcos declared martial law. And he claimed na iyahaning gi-declare ang martial law because of the growing communist, no, during that time sa Pilipinas. Mga attacks, mga communist. He claimed that mo na need sa Philippines to combat the growing communist. But according to many nga mga critics, no, and mga victims, he did this to influence the ongoing constitutional convention. Kay in 1971, kalingon naman nag-meet ang Constitutional Convention to draft a new constitution. So, as a result of that, no, because of the martial law, it resulted nga ang CONCON or the Constitutional Convention, they wrote a constitution in line, no, in line with what Marcos wanted. And that was the 1973 Constitution. So, unsa rin nahitabo sa martial law? So during sa martial law, he declared this again to claiming it was needed, kinahanglan kaayo para ma-stop ang mga communist threats as well as mga rebellion. So here, he suspended mga democratic systems and he ruled by decree, taking control of the government. So ang mga tao diri na mo-oppose sa iyaha, they claim na those people were arrested, censored, or even silenced. Okay, so during the drafting of the 1973 Constitution, the Constitutional Convention or the CONCON was called in 1971 to change the 1935 Constitution. So the 1971 Constitutional Convention was held to change the old 1935 Constitution. While it was ongoing pa ang ilang pag-draft sa new Constitution, that's the time na si Marcos had declare niya ang martial law in 1972, which gave him more control over sa process, no? And again, no, by the way, the Constitutional Convention, ang mga members anila are elected by the people, and mga delegates ani, they are often politicians or individuals chosen by voters. So, upon the pagkahuman sa 1973 Constitution, no, many people believe that it was approved in a way na unfair siya. Okay? So, one of the pag-draft nila sa Constitution, they changed the system of government, no? Instead of presidential system of government during the 1935 Constitution, ilahang giilisdan na himo siyang parliamentary system. So the leaders here of the country, like the Prime Minister and their team, are chosen by the parliament and must keep its support to stay in power. So, dili, no, let's try to differentiate gipulihan man ang gipulihan ang presidential system with the parliamentary system of government. So let's differentiate kung sa rin presidential o kung sa rin parliamentary. So when we say presidential, no, wala siya ang form of government where ang president, siya ang both head of the state and the head of the government, no? And ihang power also kay separate siya from the legislature. Okay, so makita dyan nato that in the presidential system, naa separation of powers because the president and the legislature, like the Congress, they are independent of each other. So naasad na apply diri ang checks and balances. No? Each branch, we have the executive, legislative, and judicial. They can limit the powers of the others para prevent ang abuse, no? Abuse of authority or abuse of power. So here, in the presidential system of government, the president is chosen by the people. But in the parliamentary system, no, lahi siya. It's because the parliament, in the parliamentary, ang parliament, they make the laws. And the government also carries them out. Okay, so wala na separation of power ang legislative and executive. So Marcos here, no, he became both the head of the state. So ang head of the state magod sa parliamentary, mura ra siya ceremonial head of the state. Ang prime minister siya gyud ang head of the government. So dire si Marcos, he became both the head of the state and the head of the government. Okay? nahimo siyang Prime Minister while remaining as the President of the Philippines. With that, he controlled the executive na control sad niya ang legislative branches. So with this, Marcos had all the real power, no, controlling both the government as well as the lawmakers. So, dili na makita nato nga it didn't work like a true parliamentary system yun. No? Ilahi niya. Instead of separate tao nga will serve as the head of the state and head of the government, so kanang duha ka role na ana ni Marcos during this time. So aside from that, um, he also uses the unicameral National Assembly. So legislative system with only one chamber or house that makes laws for a country. So again, nigamit siya og unicameral National Assembly. So lahi ni siya sa bicameral legislature. So diri, ang unicameral na National Assembly, they are the one who handled mga laws, while ang mga prime minister, while ang prime minister naa siya executive power in which si Marcos gitok niya ni nga rule. No? Siya ang nag-handle sa laws as well as he became the prime minister. No? And all the lawmakers meet and vote in one chamber. Okay? Kaysa unicameral nga legislature ang chamber diri sa Congress kay usa ra man. Okay. So, ang decisions and laws can be made also na dali siya mabuhat, no? Since there's no need for approval from a second chamber. Kay, isa ra man, isa ra agian. So, they're going to debate, magbuhat sila og laws, and then they're going to debate that law. So, ilahan nang i-check, no? Ilahan nang i-check, and then, muagi na siya sa usa ra ka chamber, and that what's make it na dali ra siya buhat no dali ra siya ma-approve kay dili naman sila need moagi sa second chamber. So it also replaced the traditional two-house Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives. However, it had limited independence as Marcos controlled most of the assembly's decisions. So ang Supreme Court also kay ilang authority kay mas napahina gyud siya, no? And Marcos kept full control of all government branches. So, one of the problem in the drafting of the 1973 Constitution kayang legitimacy. No? Legitimacy of 1973 Constitution's approval was considered as controversial. Okay? Controversial. Kay, di ba, here also, he legalized all the decrees, no? Mga proclamations and orders of presidents. So, yan ang gibuhat para masigurado yun yung iyang decisions and iyang actions, including those without legislative approval, were considered as valid and sundon yun sa mga tao. So, the problem here sa kaniyang constitution, kay Marcos avoided a public vote and instead, he used citizens' assemblies in which, according to some critics, no, they said na ang citizens' assemblies were manipulated to favor his rule. So, unsa ning citizens' assemblies? So, mo ni siya ang group of people na gipili, no, chosen by the government to approve the 1973 Constitution instead of mag-hold sila og public vote para lang may mapakita na ang Constitution nga nabuhat had public support. With this Constitution, so daghan kayo ang amendments nga nagawas, no? But the most controversial na amendments of the 1973 Constitution kay ang 1976 amendments. So why man? So let's take a look at the 1976 amendments. So here, nagbuhat sila mga changes sa Constitution. So the National Assembly, napulihan siya o interim batasang pambansa. So the National Assembly was replaced by the interim batasang pambansa. So this is considered as a temporary government assembly na giset ni Marcos in order to create mga laws. No, it gave him also more control and mostly ang members ani kay iyang mga supporters. So this unicameral legislature was tasked with legislative functions, pero naagyapon sila limited independence as many of its members kay aligned sa gusto ni Marcos. So aside from that, the president also would become the prime minister, so giving him control over both the executive and the legislative branch. So here, he continued to exercise the legislative powers until the end ang martial law. So, because of this na magiusa naman ang president o prime minister, usa ra siya katawo, mas blur pag ang distinction, no? Nahanap na ayo na blur pag ang distinction between the roles of the executive and legislative branch. As the prime minister, kay usually separate man gyud siya from the head of the state, no, in the true parliamentary system. But here, in the 1973 Constitution, giusa na, no? Giusa na ang prime minister and president. Marcos became the head of the state and the head of the government. So here, so during this time, no, Marcos thought na everything was in place until nga nibalik si Benigno Ninoy Aquino, and then balik siya din sa Philippines and he was assassinated, leading to a widespread outrage, forcing Marcos to hold a snap election. Unya ang result pagid sa snap election kay controversial. It's because kay gihapon ang daog, no? So it forces Filipinos to a historic uprising known as the EDSA People Power Revolution. So most ni ang nahimong reason, no, that Marcos and his family went into exile. So after this, no, after na exile ang si Marcos ug iyang family, Corazon Aquino became the president. And we have here the 1986 Freedom Constitution. So this constitution, Freedom Constitution. So in 1986, People Power Revolution overthrew Ferdinand Marcos, ending his 21-year rule. So it installed also Corazon Aquino as president, who vowed to restore democracy. So the Freedom Constitution is considered as temporary constitution to restore order and ensure smooth governance after Marcos' removal. So the EDSA People Power Revolution, no? It is a peaceful uprising in February 1986 that forced Marcos na step down na gid siya after 21 years of being the president, no? Siya ang rule sa Philippines. And it's sparked by widespread public anger over election fraud, corruption, and even human rights abuses because of the martial law. No? So this constitution, ang Freedom Constitution, temporary rin siya, no? Transitional constitution na it lasted only for a year, replacing the 1973 constitution while ang government kay nag-work pa sila on a new and permanent na constitution. So Freedom Constitution, it was followed by 1987 Philippine Constitution ato ang gigamit even today. So let's take a look at the 1987 Philippine Constitution. Okay, so the 1987 Constitution, drafted by a Constitutional Commission composed of diverse representatives, it was ratified on February 2, 1987 through a nationwide plebiscite. So it re-established a presidential system with a bicameral legislature and an independent judiciary. So here, the new constitution was created by the Constitutional Commission, no, the CONCOM. So ang Constitutional Commission, it was made of mga representatives from different sectors such as legal experts, mga academics, and community leaders. So this document was approved, no? Ang 1987 Constitution was approved also by the Filipino people in a national vote on February 2, 1987. So, what's the difference between the Constitutional Commission and the Constitutional Convention during the 1973 Constitution? So, when we say Constitutional Convention or the CONCON, no, it lets gitugutan ang mga tao not to choose representatives through elections to draft or to change a constitution, while a Well, the Constitutional Commission, or the CONCOM, the one who drafted the 1987 Constitution, it involves appointing mga experts, mga specialists na yun, to do the job, no? To do the drafting of the Constitution, making the process faster and more focused. So the 1987 Constitution also, nakafocus yun na siya on rebuilding democracy and protecting citizens' rights. That's why ang 1987 Constitution, it was known as the anti-Marcos regime, no, anti-dictator yun siya na constitution. So the 1987 Constitution also, it revolves around four themes. We have here, number one, upholding national sovereignty. So here, ang Constitution, no, iya yung gipalinaw kayo nga ang mga Filipinos are in charge of their own country. No? The Filipinos should be the one who protects our country from being controlled by foreign powers and to ensure its independence. And second, we have democratic governance and prevention of another dictatorship. So again, this constitution, it creates a system na wala na gyud one nga branch of the government, no, such as president, Congress, or Supreme Court, can become too powerful. So with that, separate yun ilang power. Okay? And there's also the application of checks and balances. And third, we have respect for human rights and civil liberties. So diri, it also guarantees mga basic freedoms yung ato ang na-enjoy today, like freedom of speech, religion, peaceful gatherings, and it also protects, no, ang mga tao, no, it also protects people from being unfairly arrested, tortured, or punished. That's why, no, moagi gyud when it comes na sa kaso, moagi gyud siya due process. Okay? And lastly, we have promotion of social justice. So there, no, it really emphasizes social justice. So the Constitution, it works to make life nga mas fair, no, fair for everyone by addressing mga inequality, and it also supports mga farmers, mga workers, and other nga mga disadvantaged na mga marginalized groups, and ensures na naa sila rights, and their rights also are being respected. So here, as you can see, though this Constitution, dili siya perfect na document, but it's the country's highest law. Okay, it is considered as the supreme law of the land. No, the guidebook, no, guideline on how the government should function. It gives the citizens rights, no, and it gives also power sa government on how they operate sa atuang country. So it binds all citizens, no, of the Philippines together. So aside from that, there are also three governmental powers. No, it included the three branches of government. We have here the executive, no, legislative, and judicial. So klaro na kayo nun sa executive. When we say executive, no, they are the ones na implement, patupad sa law. They're the one who signed the law. They're the one who enforces the law. But they're also the one who carries out the law. So when we say executive, sila ni ang mga president, vice president, and cabinet members. So ilang responsibilities, uh, um, and they're the one who lead the government and military. Pwede sa sila ma-appoint ang mga officials like judges and ambassadors. And they are also the one who manage mga foreign relations. And aside from that, sila power to veto, no? To approve legislation and to veto, no? To reject mga proposed laws or bills. Okay? So, mo na power sa president. So, the legislative branch, on the other hand, they are the ones who make, no, sila magbuhat o balaod. They're the one who make or alter the law. So, it comprises of, muna siya ang Congress. No? We uses now the bicameral legislature. No? The Congress comprises of two houses. We have the Senate and the House of Representatives. So, two chambers with siya. So, kung magbuhat og laws, agi gid siya sa Senate, and then moagi pa gid siya sa Representatives. Aya din siya ipaadto sa executive para sa approval. Okay? So, again, they are the one who draft sa ato ang laws, lahat po nag-debate, and they're the one who pass legislation, no, mga propose nila ng mga laws and bills. They're also the one who approve mga budgets. They are the ones who declare war when it comes na need na gyud sa atong country. And they are the ones also who conduct mga hearings and investigations. Lastly, we have the judicial, no, the judiciary. So, mo siya ang interpret sa law. So, mo sila ang Supreme Courts and lower courts. So, they are the one who decide if ang law ay naka-violate ba siya sa Constitution or wala. So, they ensures that ang law will be applied fairly. So, again, each of these governmental powers, no, naa sila separate nga power. So, each power separated sila with one another. And there's also the application again of checks and balances. So in the checks and balances, each branch, no, for example, the executive, na siya power to check, to restrain, or to stop the actions of the other branches. And that same goes with the judicial and legislative. Nasa sila power to correct the legislative, for example, ang judicial. Na siya power to correct, to restrain, and to stop, no, the actions of the executive. So, ingon ana lang na. Ingon ana lang ilang function. So, that lang, this is done in order to prevent, no, any of them from becoming too powerful. Kay mabot man sa ang tendency na there will be an abuse of authority, abuse of power, di ba? So again, the 1987 Constitution, kung siya ang foundation of the Philippines' current democracy. So again, it works by making sure na walay bisan isa ka tao or group of people nga na ay too much power. And that's why we divide ang power between different branches of the government, like the president, executive, the legislative, we have the Congress, the courts, we have the judicial, the Supreme Courts, so that they can check and balance each other. Okay, so I think that's the end of my part. So I hope you've learned something about this discussion. So nakatun ba? Okay, so thank you so much for listening, and I hope you've learned something today for our discussion. And thank you for listening.